we get some money and get the hell out of there. That's the plan. I had a plan. I still have a plan.
Hearing those words sends shivers down my lumbago-riddled spine. The absolute weight those words spoken by everyone's favorite wannabe dictator hold is massive.
And you know what else is massive?
Okay, seriously now. Dutch Van Der Linde might be one of the best written antagonists of all time. His sheer presence made every scene feel like a true spectacle, even when he was just begging you to put down some money into the donation box. When I started analyzing these characters a bit deeper, I started to notice that each personality trait fit perfectly with each character and their core values. Having already talked about Charles Smith and his unwavering loyalty to freedom, as well as Micah, who single-handedly managed to tear down the foundation that the gang was built upon, I finally got to the man himself, the mastermind behind every single plan that ultimately ended up failing, Dutch Van Der Linde.
The plan.
Having already played this game numerous times, I can safely say that I absolutely love Dutch. At the same time though, I can also say that I absolutely hate his guts as well. He is not the type of a character that you would really trust after seeing how he acted towards Arthur. But once he ends up absolutely smoking Micah, those feelings change again, and we are back at square one. For a long time, I thought that him wounding Micah was his kind of a revenge for what Micah did to Arthur. But after digging deeper and trying to piece together the broken personality that was Dutch Van Der Linde, I came to a conclusion that he really didn't do that for anyone but himself. From the start of the game and the intro cutscene where he acts as a preacher, we can see how his personality is that of a master manipulator. His words, soft as a triple-layered toilet paper, wiping off the tears of the gigantic loss the gang just suffered. Here, we can see how his line,
Now, if I could throw myself in the ground in their stead, I'd do it.
is used to comfort the gang, making them believe that he would gladly take a bullet for them, which itself is not true at all. He presented himself as a visionary, a philosopher, but underneath a facade of greatness, he was nothing more than an outlaw and a professional liar. The man could easily sell ice to an Eskimo while proceeding to convince him that it was all part of some greater plan. He wasn't just some rambling lunatic though. He knew exactly what he was doing. Today, we will break down the many ways Dutch played his own gang like a deck of rigged cards. We will explore why he was never the man he pretended to be, and how every choice he made was driven by one thing only: Dutch and Dutch alone. Dutch Van Der Linde always had the perfect excuse. No matter what the failure was, no matter the blood spilled, it was never really his fault. These traits are some of the most common ones found in a lot of the dictators throughout the history of our planet. Dutch is no different. When we meet Dutch at the start of RDR 2, he is giving a speech that rivals those of many leaders we either read about or witnessed ourselves.
I got hairy legs, and I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
But those that met him in the original Red Dead Redemption knew then and there that he was full of it. After all, he was a master manipulator whose only goal was to have the respect of his peers. From the beginning of RDR 2, Dutch sells himself as a father figure, a leader with a great cause. The one of freedom, loyalty, and a promise of a better life not touched by the ever-growing industrialized capitalist world. His words are drenched in revolutionary rhetoric, but beneath all of it, Dutch was selling a dream that even he didn't believe in. And that's the thing with great conmen. They don't really have to believe in the lie as long as you do. If we take the train heist from the start of the game, where the gang ends up robbing Cornwall for the first time, we can immediately see how the cracks in his Supreme Leader facade begin to show. He didn't need to rob the train by any means. He wanted to, just to spite his bitter rival, Colm O'Driscoll, or as Roger Clark would pronounce it properly, Colm O'Driscoll.
It's pronounced column. It's not colm.
These first few instances foreshadow the personality shift that we will be witnessing later on in the game. As the game progresses and the gang is forced to move from one camp to another, Dutch ends up shedding his Supreme Leader dedicated to his people persona and slowly starts showing his true self. Once his authority starts getting questioned, Dutch starts to show what he truly is: a paranoid, aggressive, and increasingly desperate liar. He never really wanted to lead a gang. Instead, he wanted to be worshipped and put on a pedestal for his brilliant mind for everyone to see. If we take Hosea for instance, one of the few sane folks in the Van Der Linde gang, we can see that Dutch does respect Hosea in a way. But the second Hosea starts questioning Dutch and his decision making, it's over. Suddenly, Dutch starts ignoring him, shutting him down, and keeping him out of major discussions and choices. When the gang arrives in St. Denis, Dutch doesn't even consult Hosea before jumping into business with Angelo Bronte. It's clear that Dutch doesn't want advice. He wants obedience. He never really cared about how his gang truly felt, and if they lived or died. The true unraveling of his personality comes after Guama and is now infamous.
But you said you knew Spanish. I know human beings.
After Dutch unalives the woman in cold blood, based on the look she gave him, we finally get to see who this man truly is. A cold-blooded murderer with no sense for right or wrong. In my last video I said that Micah was even worse than we thought, and I still think that he definitely managed to take down the foundation that the gang was built upon, despite the fact that the same foundation was built on top of a big pile of lies. The gang wouldn't have ended the way it did if it wasn't for Micah, but looking at it now, through the character of Dutch, the gang would have probably ended up even worse, with probably many of the gang members dying in meaningless heists and robberies he and his brilliant mind planned out. Before Guama, Dutch still pretended to be a man of honor. He sold the dream to everyone, despite not really believing it himself. But after the gang's escapade on Guama, that pretense is gone. Dutch comes back colder, angrier, and even more detached from the gang that he's supposed to lead. His speeches become shorter and more hostile. The weights of his own failures slowly start crashing down on him, and instead of taking responsibility for his own actions, Dutch does what he always did best: blame everyone else. In this time frame, Micah becomes his new right-hand man, not because Micah is loyal, but because Micah is the only one telling Dutch exactly what he wants to hear. One of the last moments in chapter 6, when Dutch lets Arthur and Micah fight it out, is what really shows who this man truly is. A true leader dedicated to his people would have never let it get that far, but by then, he's fully consumed by his own legend. He doesn't care who dies in this battle, as long as it isn't him. Dutch wasn't the leader. He was someone who controlled the gang. He, of course, didn't do it through brute force or fear, at least not at first. His real power was the way he had with words. This is one of the main reasons that even as his actions slowly became more and more reckless, most of the gang still followed him. Dutch made the gang feel like they had a say in their own lives, but in reality, they really didn't. Every major choice was made way before anyone else had a chance to speak their mind. His constant proposal of dangerous ideas as if they were the only option left was a sign of a true manipulator who cared about nothing but himself. For him, it was never, should we do this? It was always, we have no choice but to do this. The most obvious example that I can think of is the fact that he single-handedly took his own men into a war that wasn't theirs to fight. I do understand that they needed a way to get off the island, but Dutch was thinking of only one thing here: how he would look as a folk hero, someone who led a brave rebellion in the war against a despicable dictator. One thing I can safely say that I truly feel like is overlooked by a lot of folks is the fact that the rebel leader from the original RDR has a lot of traits that Dutch himself also possesses. Abraham Reyes, just like Dutch, was a man who managed to gather enough people by his side to cause a lot of mayhem to the local government. The difference between Dutch and Abraham is the fact that Abraham Reyes managed to actually become more than just an outlaw. After John dies and we take control of Jack in Red Dead Redemption, we can see that Abraham Reyes was nothing more than a conman who only wanted power, which in the end he got. The same can be said for our boy Dutch, as the parallels between the two of them are eerie, especially as Abraham Reyes actually admired Dutch's way. Moving on from the Reyes comparison, all we need to do to see who and what kind of a man Dutch really was is look at the way he treated our boy Arthur Morgan. He truly did not care about Arthur. He saw him as a tool to be used to ensure his own safety, a figure that he can put out in front to protect his own rear end. The most obvious example comes from the parlay with Colm O'Driscoll.
Colm.
Here, we can see the true Dutch peek out in full for the first time. He never lost his mind. As for that to happen, he needed to be sane to begin with. At the first glance of weakness, or as soon as someone questioned his authority, that person was no longer an asset and for all he cared, could be left behind. Despite what his words made folks believe, he never really had intentions of truly saving anyone. By the time Red Dead Redemption 2 reaches its final act, Dutch is nothing more than a ghost of the man he once pretended to be. The speeches are still there, the grand visions of a better life still spill out from his mouth, but with a hollow ring to them. His dream is dead, his gang is shattered, and the worst part, he's the only one who can't see it. Dutch, like Micah, was always playing a role. At the height of his power, he wasn't just a gang leader. He saw himself as a symbol, a warrior fighting against the system, a revolutionary of sort. But when that image started falling apart, he didn't know how to function properly. Deep down, Dutch was never really fighting for his gang. He was fighting for himself. He wasn't a selfless leader. He wasn't fighting for anyone, nor was he really fighting for the freedom that he also claimed. He was fighting to win. He didn't want to lose, and he was going to do anything in his power to avoid losing. This is why when he's backed onto the edge of a cliff with John Marston holding him at gunpoint, he doesn't want to admit defeat. He goes out on his own terms, jumping from the high pedestal that he put himself onto. He knew exactly what he was doing, as his only goal was to win at all costs. This is why he ended up shooting Micah. This is why he threw Angelo Bronte to the swamp puppies, and why he had to take out Cornwall in the end. Every single time he had to have his way. There was no real plan for the consequences of his actions. Just lies that he spoke softly in hopes that the gang will believe him. He truly did know what he was doing, as everything he did was done to satisfy his ever-growing need to win. Every single score after Blackwater had to be bigger than the one before. This was his way of compensating for the failure in Blackwater. In the end, no matter how much money the gang had, and no matter how much money Arthur put into the donation box, they would never truly end up being free. Even if they escaped to Tahiti with enough money to start their own microstate, Dutch would find someone else that he would need the best. If it wasn't the Pinkertons, Cornwall, or Driscolls, or Fusar, it would be bloody malaria. He was just that type of a person, one that never managed to let things go. He needed to be remembered, no matter what. Anyways, thank you for taking time to watch this video, and a big thank you to all the 461 people that subscribed. You guys are the best. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, and of course subscribe for a chance to win an RTX 7090 card once we reach 10 million. Stay silly, keep edging, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.